Hello and welcome back to the Courtroom Advocate channel. My name is Miriam Washira. Thanks for watching and subscribing. Today I want to talk about women in prisons and why women end up in prison. In one of my previous videos, I talked of a young girl whose only option was prison due to her circumstances. But there are so many other women who are in prison, and the question we're asking today is, why are there so many women in prison and what makes women end up in prison? There are different things that lead women to prison, and the major one I've seen is economics motivated crimes. These are crimes that are where women are just out looking to make a life with whatever they can find. So you'll find that quite a big population in prison, women who are there are because of liquor related cases. These are illicit brew, as we call them, where they're brewing either changa or busa, and they're arrested and brought to court. They're brought to court under the Liquor Act, and I find it very unfortunate that these are just women who are out trying to make a living. Of course, we agree that the illicit brew is harming the society, but I also think that there could be other options of helping these women or dealing with these women, so that rather than putting them in, because what happens is that most of them are put in and they actually serve a sentence, because most of them will not afford the kind of fine that the court asks them, so they end up in prison. And once they are out, because we didn't empower them anyhowly, even when they were in prison, we did not give them an alternative, and yet they're going back to their children are looking up for them, up to them for food. So it ends up being that they are getting back to prison in big numbers. So it becomes a cycle where a woman is in for several days, several months, and then goes out, and then they are rearrested and so on. But because this is the only livelihood they know, or this is the only way they know how to make a living. So I think it's a call, even as we are looking into the system, to think, how do we empower these women so that we give them alternatives? You know, what is the government doing to ensure that women do not go back into prison over and over because of illicit brew? Are there any other avenues? Is there a way we can even, rather than it being illicit, is there a way we can help our society and our community, those who are brewing it, to do it the right way, so that it is no longer illicit, but it can come to be known and manufactured in clean environments, and it is actually consumable. So I think for me, those women who are in prison for that, I find it very unfair, because it also leads to a lot of child neglect, where they have left their children out there. It's leading to child abuse. Young children are left as heads of family because of this. So I think that is one of the reasons actually that women, there's also those who are also on the extreme, involved in robbery, those involved in impersonation, a lot of conning. A lot of women now are in for conning others, public, on different things. So it is something that we need to think about, why women are really going into prison. The other reason I found a lot of women in prison is domestic violence, and I know we tend to think women are the victims, so the question is, why do they then end up in prison? But our system is so screwed in the sense that we tend to view the woman always, you know, like not the victim, you know, like the perpetrator, and especially when they react back. So we expect a woman to be beaten over and over, but when they react back, rather than us looking at her like the victim and helping her, we actually arrest her and take her. There are several women who are in prison on a domestic violence basis, who are just protecting themselves, you know. And several of them have said, I have reported this matter to the police several times. We have talked with the family, I've run away, I've been told go back. And when they come back and they try to protect themselves, in the process, maybe there's an assault, to the very extreme, there's death, and so they're charged with manslaughter or they're charged with murder, but yet they're victims. I think the court needs to think deeper on how to deal with this matter. Because I think it's not fair that a victim end up being more like the perpetrator of suffering, you know, when they're protecting themselves. Later on in a different video, we'll look at the Prevention of Domestic Violence Act and how the state is supposed to protect women and children and everybody in the society against domestic violence. We'll dig a bit into it and see how we can actually prevent victims ending up in prison for protecting themselves, or just protecting themselves literally, and they end up in prison. So there are several women who are in prison, and when you ask what was it about, it was more a domestic violence matter than a crime per se. The other things, the other big number of women in prison at the moment is child neglect, which also is a thing we need to look into as a society. Why are so many women in for child neglect? And when I go to the men prison, there are very few men in for child neglect. Yet, when it comes to women, there are so many child neglect. But when you listen to their stories and why they ended up there, most of them are actually, there are few who are very extreme, those who either abused children or just out of carelessness leave the child for no good reason. But actually majority of them who are charged with child neglect is because they leave, maybe most actually leave their children to go fed for them, go to make a living for them, and because they cannot afford a nanny or somebody to leave the child with, then maybe a neighbor reports the child has been crying, and they go report the matter to the police, and the woman is arrested, the mother is arrested for child neglect. Mostly we see it related to the commercial sex workers when they leave their children at night and they're going out to try and make a living. There are some who are also arrested because they left their children and they went looking for work. Like if it's a mama fua, how will she tarry along with all her children to go to a person's place to wash clothes, and then they are arrested for that. Of course, we'll talk about women who are very cruel on another video and what leads to this. But it's a concern for me why we have so many women in and no men. And maybe on a different platform we'll discuss this whole of child neglect and why women are made to, when a man leaves their child and goes away, nobody charges them with child neglect, and yet a woman is made to spend so much time and resources in court trying to make them provide. And yet for a woman, rather than being taken to a civil court, they are taken to a criminal court, and they get a criminal record. Why so? Why the double standard? We'll discuss that into details. I know it's controversial, but I think it's something that as a society we need to think about. Why men are brought to civil court and the woman has to suffer actually trying to make them provide, where a woman, if they don't provide and take care of their child, they're taken into a criminal court. So that is one of the other reasons why there are so many women in prisons on child neglect issues. The other one I've found is more of mental health issues that are bringing women into prison. And these are issues of where a woman is not able to take care. Actually, it's more connected with child neglect, because of their mental health. They're not taking care of their children. Maybe a woman is depressed or has, mental disorders that make them not be a fit mother, or being unable to take care of their children. And then what happens? Rather than us helping them, we arrest them and bring them to court. I recently encountered a case where a woman was brought in because of leaving their newly born alone, or trying to actually discard the baby. And for her, she was suffering from postpartum depression. We know that is a condition. We know many women suffer from it, but rather than supporting them, we actually arrest them and bring them to court. So for this case, actually, if it wasn't the intervention of an advocate, that woman was going to be jailed. But the advocate didn't intervene, and medical records were brought in to show that actually she was suffering from postpartum depression. So we are finding a lot of women in for things that are more mental illness related than per se a crime. There are women who will assault, but they're not assaulting because they are criminals, but because they have a mental disorder. So, and mostly you see there's quite a correlation between neglect, domestic violence, mental illness, and then now how the women end up in prison. So there are women, for instance, they have been through a lot of domestic violence, which means they are not mentally stable, and so they end up, you know, by the anger and the frustrations, they end up beating their child, or end up just neglecting their child's nutrition and so on. So there's a whole correlation between all those. But I think what my point is that we need to think through that women do not necessarily stay in prison when actually they should be seeking, or they should be provided medical attention. There are also other women who end up in prison for what we call a one life changing moment. You know, mostly we call them crime of passion. You know, you found your boyfriend or your husband with another woman, you're there beating them, you're there, you know, to the very extreme, even killing them, killing either the woman or your husband or your partner. These are called life-changing moments, you know. Out of that passion or out of that anger, you do something that you totally regret. There are several of those also in our prisons. Very unfortunate, but as much as for them it's more of a crime, so it's calling upon women, before you go attacking, think about your life. Do you want to spend your life in prison? Is there any other solution? Should you go cool out? You know, when your friend calls you and tells you have seen Baba Nani with another woman somewhere, do you rush there, or do you just keep calm and handle it from a different perspective? Because you might find yourself behind bars, and prison is not anywhere any human being should be. So also being that reasonable, thinking through actions that, you know, those life moments, you know, those very either frustrating moments or very moments full of anger, you know, full of passion, that you do not end up committing a crime. So just thinking through this, and maybe as a conclusion, is saying that most of the women who are in prison actually don't deserve to be in prison. There are very few women actually I would call deserving to be in prison. You know, those who have committed crimes, maybe those on robbery cases, people who have really meditated upon their crime and they had every intention. But I would say confidently that most of the women who end up in prison do not know that they're actually okay, they know they're committing a crime, but they do not have an alternative, especially when it comes to the economic part of it. So I find it a catch-22, where you go, if you go for commercial sex worker, maybe you're arrested for it, but when your child is hungry and they come and find the child is malnutrition, we still arrest you for child neglect. So it's a catch-22 for most women, and especially the low-income women. So it's calling upon us as a society, as a system, a justice system, that we do not criminalize poverty, and women are given a chance to provide and to grow and to realize their dreams as well. Thanks for watching. Look out for the next video.